And as people are joining, if you could just say hello in the chat and tell us where you're joining from and what subject area you teach, that would be very helpful so we can know some of who we're talking with. Chester, New York, world history. All right, teaching sophomores. Hello from Salt Lake City. Thank you. Thank you for, you got a librarian in the house. That's awesome. We love librarians. Very cool. All right, so we're going to kick this off as people are kind of trickling in. My name is John Silva from the NewsLitCamp project. Welcome to session 4 of today's NewsLitCamp. Today we're going to be talking about how a local investigation unfolds. We're going to be talking to some experts here. We have Dave Bisco-Bing, investigative reporter from KNXV TV in Phoenix. We got Bill Williams, who is the investigative reporter at WTVF TV in Nashville, and then Lori Jane Gliha, investigative reporter from Scripps News. We're really excited to have all three of you here. I'm going to go through a couple little general things, just so everybody's aware. This session and all sessions from today are being recorded, and so they will be made available probably by Monday. If you would like a certificate of attendance, and also just to give us some feedback, we'll drop a link to a feedback survey towards the end of today's session. Any of the materials and resources and presentations that we use in any of our sessions in today's NewsLitCamp are going to be shared with you in a shared resource folder. And then as a reminder, all of the resources like today's learning from the NewsLitCamp project are completely free. Since we are using a webinar format today, just important to note, if you would like to just make a general comment about some things that are happening, share your feedback, use the chat function. If you want to ask a question about any of the content that we are sharing or discussing today, drop it into the Q&A box, please, and then we will share, we'll sort of pause at a few points and share those questions and try to answer them as best we can. Getting your question, turn up my microphone. All right, we'll see. Hopefully this improves. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to kick it over to Lori first to sort of start talking a little bit about the work that you do, and we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, excellent. Sure. My name is Lori Jane Gliha, and I'm a national investigative reporter for Scripps News. I've got 21 years of experience being a TV reporter. Most of that's been investigative. And basically what it means being a national reporter is that I am not restricted to one specific region or state. I can travel across the country, and I focus a lot on kind of what's trending that may need to be investigated or something that's of national interest. So for example, one of the recent projects that I've been working on has to do with babies, toddlers, and young children who have been poisoned by or who have overdosed on fentanyl. And I've traveled from Maine to California, Louisiana, Missouri, Arizona to cover that case. And I can get into a little bit later of how that story came to be. It's a multi-part series that we've done that is making an impact across the country. And but I think I'd like to play a little clip first. It's the first minute of the special that we just did, and it can be a little bit difficult to see because it involves, so there's a warning. Go for it.
What is your emergency? What is going on? I need you to stop yelling at me.
The pleas for help
Can someone answer me? He's dying!
are coming in from all over the country.
He's lethargic. He looks purple and blue. Oh no, my daughter! I don't know what's wrong with her. Going on? Not breathing.
The calls are for people poisoned by the opioid fentanyl.
This drug overdose. I've seen this before. My son got into fentanyl.
And you said it's your son? How old is he?
He's 2.
So basically, a lot of what we do, so what I ended up doing was gathering more than 300 cases from around the country with my colleague. We analyzed every single one of those cases by gathering public records, which are things like all that body camera that you saw, 911 calls, court records, arrest affidavits. We read through every single one of those cases. We made our own spreadsheet and we were able to come up with trends and things that are happening. And we were able to bring those things to light to health leaders and congressional leaders who are listening to what we're reporting on. But a lot of what we, and I can a little later talk about how this story came to be and how we got into it. But I quickly want to talk about another project that I worked on as well, that and why I do what I do. I think one of the reasons why I became an investigative reporter, or just a reporter in general, is because I always trust myself more than anybody else. I hate to say that, but to get it right, to get the facts, to get the truth, to make sure it's accurate. And I also have a deep respect for the variety of perspectives that people have when looking at the same issue. You can be looking at the very same thing, but see it differently. But facts are facts. So I know it's very important to present information in a certain way that everybody can understand. I think some of the things I've learned too throughout my process of being a reporter is question authority, even if it is somebody who is an authority, and ask for proof of things that may come in the form of public records, that may come in the form of video, audio, things like that. And a quick next little clip I'm going to show you, and then I'll move on to the next person. But this is a project I did related to the use of ketamine by paramedics to sedate agitated people who may be in police custody. It became a very controversial thing here in Colorado after we had a man named Elijah McClain die. And how this drug was used and whether it was being used properly. And through the course of my reporting, I found there were many other cases in which there were questionable things happening. And a medical agency in authority told me, oh yes, we do everything by this protocol. We would never listen to a police officer and have them request this drug of us. We only make medical decisions. Well, I asked for proof. I questioned authority. I got the body camera footage. I had to fight to get it and help. I spent hours looking through every single minute of that footage, and then I found a smoking gun. So here's a little clip of that project I've done called In Real Life Injected.
I started investigating ketamine in 2019. A guy named Elijah McClain died. He was 23 years old in Aurora, Colorado. Somebody called 911 to say he looked sketchy.
Stop. Stop. I have a right to stop you because you're being suspicious.
That triggered police to go respond to the scene, and within seconds, 3 police officers were surrounding him. They ended up bringing him down to the ground. When the paramedics arrived, they ended up deciding to give him ketamine.
Just rub it in his ear if he fights, all right?
And he never regained consciousness.
Asking for an independent investigation.
Then being injected with ketamine.
Protesters demanding 3 officers be charged.
Demanding justice for Elijah
McClain's family is planning to file a civil lawsuit.
This is the general area where police approached Elijah McClain over the weekend.
I was one of the first reporters on the case. We started gathering information. We got the body cam. We saw that Elijah McClain was not committing any crime. Fast forward almost 2 years later, the amended autopsy report comes out. And now they said the cause of death, complications of ketamine administration following forcible restraint.
Let's get him on the gurney first. Okay.
Paramedics say they need this drug. They say that it has one of the safest profiles compared to any of the other drugs that they have. This is for those occasions when someone is so out of control or so out of their mind, they need to be calmed down so that they don't create a further health issue.
How much have you had to drink?
Yeah.
Almost immediately after I reported on the Elijah McClain case, I found out about another case. A guy with a very similar name, Elijah McKnight, said, hey, I think the same thing happened to me. I was injected with something. He was drunk.
You're gonna get tased. You're gonna get tased.
I helped Elijah McKnight get access to that body cam. What I found was that he was able to speak to first responders. He knew what his name was.
Who's the president of the United States?
The paramedics are about to leave the scene, and the deputies say, isn't there something you can give him?
We can give him ketamine and he'll be sleeping like a baby.
And they end up injecting him 2 different times, and he ended up in the ICU. And I thought, wow, do people know that this is happening? What is this drug? How is it being used? And is it being used appropriately every single time?
So that is just an example of questioning authority, even if someone tells you something that they never give the drug to anybody that, they only give it to people who are out of their mind or are incoherent. And then you find the video proof, and then you keep digging, and you keep going for it. And I think public records, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, are very important. So what I do is make sure that everyone gets the truth, the accurate information, and that they get it with as much context and information as possible.
All right, we'll cover some questions about each segment once we get through things. I'm going to go to Phil next. So Phil, you have a sort of a different sort of focus in the investigative work that you do as more as a local investigative reporter. So tell us a little bit about the work, about how you do your work, and please make sure you unmute.
Yes. After 3 years or 4 years of doing this, you think I'd know. My name is Phil Williams. I am the chief investigative reporter for the CBS affiliate in Nashville, News Channel 5. I have been at this station doing investigative reporting for 25 years, been in the business a little over 35 years, mainly doing investigative reporting. The thing that I really like about my job is, and I think I probably speak for the other panelists as well, we get paid to make a difference in our community. And that is, the incredible part of being an investigative reporter. Just to give you an idea, I specialize in corruption. My favorite investigation was the story I did a few years ago, where just west of town, there was an interstate interdiction unit that was stopping out-of-state drivers, mostly people of color, and taking their cash off of them based on the, quote, suspicion that it was drug money. And then the agencies got to keep the money to fund their own salaries. And so that was an example of sort of being a voice for the voiceless and making a difference. My most recent investigation of note, there were white supremacists who tried to gain a political foothold in an affluent community just south of Nashville. I was able to expose them. Voters turned out in record numbers, and the candidates associated with the white supremacists were defeated. I'll say that probably the most important investigations I ever do are the ones that never make it to air, because we have a very high standard of wanting to make sure that we can prove what we suspect. And if we cannot come up with the evidence and the evidence is not solid, we have to be willing to walk away from the story. It's just the nature of what we do. So walking away is hard sometimes, but it's the right thing to do. My focus these days is on political investigations. And there's just so much material there because there is so much happening at all levels of government, involving individuals often with questionable motives. Breaking news, politicians don't always tell the truth. And so my job is to hold a magnifying glass up to what they're saying and analyzing what they say legislation will do, for example, and looking at, is that what it's really doing? Looking at whether democracy is being allowed to work or debate is being suppressed, and really comparing what they say in public versus what is happening in private, what is happening in those public records, what is happening behind the scenes. I think the three most important skills that I bring to my job is, number one, understanding how the system works, because you can't really show how the system is broken unless you really understand how it's supposed to work. Number two is research skills, just kind of knowing where to look for public records, where to look for the evidence that you need. And lastly is, and this is really relevant to teachers, is critical listening skills. Often I will get into a situation where I'm interviewing a politician and I will ask a question. And if I'm not on my toes, I may let it slip that the person actually isn't answering the question. So I have to be on my toes to, as I ask a question, to listen to the answer and be ready to immediately say, wait a second, you didn't answer that question. An example I would like to show here that gives you a good sense of what it is I do and how I do it is a story. There's been a major push in Tennessee to privatize public education. And so this is an example of where we discovered what officials were saying in public was very different from what they were saying in private. And then the second half of this is when I confront the governor of the state of Tennessee. And I would say, as you watch, listen to my questions, listen to his answers, and then decide whether he is actually answering the question as it is asked. So let's take a look.
Sees this video and hears about this because they need to know.
Hidden camera video reveal. Tennessee's governor caught on camera with an education advisor who mocks public school teachers, even questioning their intelligence.
Our investigation is about to take you behind closed doors into a world where public education and public school teachers are openly ridiculed.
You will see how education destroys generations of people. It's devastating. It's like a plague.
This event, an invitation-only reception hosted by Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Michigan's conservative Hillsdale College, his surprise guest, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee.
For decades, Hillsdale College has been a standard bearer in quality curriculum and in the responsibility of preserving American liberty.
Earlier this year, Lee announced a partnership with Hillsdale to use Tennesseans' tax dollars to set up 50 privately operated charter schools across the state.
I still think we need 100 charter schools.
Among the audience, at least one longtime advocate for privatizing Tennessee's public schools, along with a guest who was secretly recording and who provided that recording to News Channel 5 Investigates. It was an audience that found humor as the Hillsdale president mocked teachers who have education degrees.
If you work in a college, you'll know this, unless you work in the ed department. Ours is different, but they're the dumbest part of every college.
He just called teachers the most ignorant people on a college campus, and they laughed.
It was a statement that shocked a former teacher, now a Democratic lawmaker.
I am absolutely flabbergasted about this.
Along with a longtime conservative who now lobbies Capitol Hill for Tennessee teachers.
I mean, it's an insult to the students that go through colleges of education. It's an insult to the professors and the people who teach. Our educators. And they're messing with people's children. And they feel entitled to do anything to them.
It was a theme to which Arnn returned with the governor sitting at his side.
The teachers are trained in the dumbest parts of the dumbest colleges in the country. And they're taught that they're going to go and do something to those kids.
He says teachers come from the dumbest parts of the dumbest colleges.
And the governor is sitting here while this is happening, saying nothing.
The governor's office had claimed Bill Lee had no public events this week.
Hey, Governor, can we ask you a couple of questions?
Hi, Phil. Yeah, I'm about to speak.
But thanks to a viewer tip, we found him here at a conference for agriculture teachers less than 2 weeks after this video.
The teachers are trained in the dumbest parts of the dumbest colleges in the country.
Showed Lee sitting quietly as his friend and education advisor, Dr. Larry Arnn from the ultra-conservative Hillsdale College, badmouthed public school teachers and the colleges that teach them. In his last media availability, the governor refused to disavow the remarks made by the man he has invited to set up charter schools across the state.
Some educators think you need to do more to repudiate Dr. Arnn's words. Are you willing to do that?
You know what, I've said what I'm going to say about this. I fully support our teachers, and I'm here to talk to them.
Teaching is a very high calling.
And they're not trained that way anymore, and that's too bad.
And new video uncovered this week led to new calls for Lee to denounce his friend's remarks.
You'll have to talk to other people about their comments.
But you were there, sir.
That's right. And
you
I
didn't
made
speak up.
comments.
And you didn't speak up.
That's right.
And some educators think you need to do more.
Yes.
What do you say to those educators?
I say I fully support our educators, and I want them to listen to my words to them. I appreciate them. I support them, and I'm grateful for them.
Chairman White says.
Still, we had questions about comments made this week by the Republican chairman of a key House Education Committee. Mark White posted on Facebook, when the General Assembly convenes again next January, any hope that Hillsdale will operate in Tennessee has been shattered. Lee's reaction?
Chairman White says that Hillsdale's hopes have been shattered. What do you say to that?
Yeah, Haley, just 1 second. You'll have to talk to Chairman White about that.
What is your reaction, sir?
My reaction is that I'm about to go speak to teachers, fully supportive of them.
So my job as an investigative reporter is to be persistent. It is to try to get answers to questions, to engage with public officials, to ask the questions that the viewers would like to have answered, and to listen carefully and be engaged. And so, and I'm sure we'll talk about all of this more later.
Very cool. Thanks, Phil. And so let's go to David next.
Hi, I'm Dave Biskobing. I'm the chief investigative reporter in Phoenix. I have been there like 16 years, and I have another 2-ish years in news. My focus really is accountability, investigative reporting. And what I mean by that, it is less explanatory. It is very much holding people in power accountable. It's what I gravitate towards. It's what a lot of my stories focus on most, almost exclusively. And what really drives me to do what I do is to hold people accountable who take advantage of someone, something, a loophole, a system, their power. And there's no shortage of that. And really, I think we're getting to a situation, especially with kind of how the news industry is going, shrinking in a lot of ways, especially in the local communities, that people in power get to conduct a lot of their business in secrecy without anyone paying attention. And I think the power of what we do and the importance of what I try to focus on is the fact that when you finally put a spotlight on these people, you not only find out what they've done, but you get to see, how they respond to it. And I think that really is what I focus on. I think of my investigations as really two parts. One is first exposing what they've done, but then once I've done that, to really keep persistent pressure on them to show how they respond. Really, it's not only to expose, but it's to show in real time how they respond to the truth coming out, because I think that's as important for our elected officials, our police chiefs, our county attorneys, district attorneys, whoever it may be, that you get to see not only do we expose them doing something wrong, but are they going to try to correct that and be better, or are they going to engage in some sort of cover-up, right? We've all heard the cliche, there's the crime, but the cover-up's worse than the crime. And I find that that's often true when you start putting the spotlight on it. In the last several years, I'd say the last 4 years, I've almost exclusively reported on police and prosecutorial misconduct in the Phoenix area. And, I keep thinking we'll find the bottom, and we don't. But I actually, knowing the kind of stories that Lori, Jane, and Phil were going to show, I wanted to show something not lighter, but it just shows to the kind of the theme of accountability reporting, but showing someone taking advantage of someone or something. In this case, it was a group of lawyers, really one, but a couple of lawyers and some plaintiffs who were maybe the most prolific filers of ADA type lawsuits anywhere ever. They had filed about 8,000 in Arizona by the time that we got them shut down, our stories. They were already making plans to spread out across the country and file hundreds of thousands of these. They were literal drive-by lawsuits, in some cases not at all. They would hire people to sit in rooms, like me in front of this computer, check Google Maps and find perhaps parking lots that weren't up to code, and they would just file a lawsuit without even checking. And they were really shakedown attempts. And so the story you're about to see is not only showing that we're reporting on what they're doing, we actually show you who these people are, how they respond to what we expose about them. And I think that's the most telling of all. And that's what I try to do. So I hope we can get that clip.
Your story is garbage news, and you're making an embarrassment of your news station.
All right, why are these people so upset with ABC 15 investigator Dave Biskobing? Take a look at this. Why are they having someone follow him in a car, recording his every move?
It's because of the 3-month investigation you're about to see.
So here's Dave to explain.
This is all about parking lots, and disability access. Under the Americans with Disability Act, businesses need enough spaces, enough space between spaces, proper signs at the proper height, and that little van notice. But miss one, be just an inch off, and there's a new group who will sue and demand thousands to settle. They say it's advocacy. Others call it extortion. You watch, and you decide.
This is Advocates for Individuals with Disabilities, AID for short. Founded this year, their videos show them handing out things like a special brace, a scooter, and a window AC unit. There's nothing controversial about that. But what is controversial is how they make money. It's with lawsuits, hundreds and hundreds of them, bringing in millions of dollars. Lawsuits filed by AID, along with this man.
As disabled people, we don't have a voice.
David Ritzenthaler is 74, had hip surgery last year. A self-proclaimed minister.
Listen to what God had to say.
He considers his lawsuits for AID public service.
And I said, I love what you're doing.
Ritzenthaler's filed 530 lawsuits this year. Restaurants, banks, offices. This minister even sued this strip club.
He's a committed individual.
Peter Stroynick is attorney for both David Ritzenthaler and AID.
David Ritzenthaler gone to all 500 of those businesses?
No.
But he's the plaintiff.
Yes. And the question is?
So he doesn't have to go for you to sue the business?
Absolutely correct.
Really?
Yeah.
Critics call them drive-by lawsuits because AID staff cruise parking lots looking for violations. This auto parts store got sued. Why?
I didn't have a van accessible sign.
For that, owner Bob Curtis says AID wanted $5,000 to settle.
Yeah, $50 sign for $5,000. To me, it's extortion.
Is that really an accessibility issue that requires a lawsuit?
Oh, yes.
To AID, any violation is discrimination, and they plan to file 100,000 of these lawsuits across the country.
The purpose is to do something incredibly good. We are trying to affect a change.
We don't want more lawsuits.
But Phil Pangrazio says they're hurting, not helping. So does John Moore.
Harms all of our efforts.
And Larry Wanger.
And abusing the laws.
These well-known advocates run 3 prominent Arizona disability organizations.
High-frequency lawsuit filing is giving the ADA a bad name. They really are distancing themselves from you guys. They don't want anything to do with you. What do you think that says?
Well, that says that we are probably going to be the most effective advocacy group of any advocacy group that had ever been established.
And that seems ironic.
So this is where they do business.
Because at the parking lots for 2 buildings where AID operates, we found low signs.
41.
Spaces with no signs.
2 spots coming up.
Around this entire building, not a single van notice, including the spot.
We're missing the sign.
Right in front of AID's door. There we also found faded paint and a ramp overrunning and blocking the access lane.
We'll have to check on that.
That's not good.
A big violation, says ADA compliance expert Peter Fisher.
Or are they in compliance, yes or no?
No.
Even close?
No.
And when we went inside to ask AID about the parking lots, out came their spokesperson, Jennifer Rogers, and Alex Callan, a legal assistant.
We checked both this location and your other location where you guys have the checks sent, and neither one of them are in compliance with the ADA. I don't know if you guys knew that.
I don't know if you know that, but this is not a building of public accommodation.
That's why AID says this building doesn't have to comply. But our expert disagrees, and AID must be worried about us checking.
58, that's right.
Because they sent out this employee to film us and walk with us until she broke her shoe. Ended up barefoot. She then got in a car and started filming while driving, at points swerving close to us.
We don't want you to hit us, so we're going to go in this spot area, so I don't know what you need to do to work around us. We just don't... Okay, thank you. We just worry about people using their phones and driving a little bit, so...
And all this really comes down to one thing.
You're going to sue other businesses for not having these access issues. You brought people to this building who have disabilities. You don't think that maybe that you should hold yourselves to the same standards as the places you guys are suing?
Would you guys like to leave?
And when we left, they left us with this final thought.
Your story is garbage news, and you're making an embarrassment of your news station.
Thank you. Aid claims they've asked their landlord to fix those issues, but hasn't sued them. And if you think what we found in their parking lot raises more questions about their organization, you're right. And we found out all of their answers add up. Our investigation continues tomorrow night at 6.
All right, so as you saw, advocacy groups with deep roots in our community disagree with what Aid is doing, but that doesn't mean this isn't an important issue.
So that's why for businesses, we've got the rules and regulations you need to know to help you be in compliance, serve your community, and avoid a lawsuit.
It is all on a special webpage dedicated to this issue, abc15.com/lawsuits.
So anyways, I guess I'll just kind of close by saying, you can report what those people are doing, their explanations, but I mean, to really show what they believe and to kind of confront them with it and to carry out this kind of reporting in real time, I think explains, far more than anything else I could say, just in terms of, beyond the facts. And so to me, that's kind of one of the examples that guides how I carry out a lot of my reporting. Because not only do I want people to see and know what happened, I want people to actually see the people that are doing it and why they do it the way they do it, and to make them uncomfortable because their actions, another cliche, speak louder than words. So.
Very cool. So I know I have a few questions I'm going to kind of throw out there. If anybody wants to ask a question about any of these stories or any of their work, please feel free to drop it in the Q&A. But I want to start with you, Dave, on this one in particular and kind of kick it to all three of you. I live in Chicago. Corruption is a way of life here. So, how do these stories come into your newsroom, and what happens sort of behind the scenes to decide that you're going to devote your time and your resources to actually do your investigation?
So I will kind of answer that question in two parts, and LJ's probably, in fairness, a little bit different because she's got a national kind of focus, but I think for Phil, it's probably similar to me. I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong. The stories that come in when you've been in a place as long as I have, and then for Phil, who's the preeminent expert on local investigative reporting. But I mean, I think when you start out in a newsroom and you're a younger investigative reporter, regular reporter, people look for things to look at, or they rely on tips kind of coming into the newsroom. When you've been in a place for a while, for me, I would say at least in the past eight years-ish, I don't think that my story list is so long. The people that come to me because of the work that we're doing, it's like a snowball effect. A phrase that we use kind of, it's like when you start doing investigative reporting and you start doing it really well, and the community sees the impact and support that you can provide them, you kind of are like a hurricane and you create your own weather. So when we do stories like this, it only drives other people to come to you specifically with those types of stories and things that they want to see you look into. And so I really find that good investigative reporting drives more investigative reporting, and really for a lot of newsrooms that don't do it well, it's because they haven't tried or started, and they're not serious about it. And for the ones that really become advocates for their communities, we don't have enough time to get to all the things we find out. And then what was the second part of your question? I think it was, how do we dedicate the resources, or?
Yeah. Once you do that, so like, who else is sort of working with you on these, and like, I'm sure it's not just you, right? So I'm curious, like, how many people are kind of helping you, because these take time.
I mean, it depends, right? Every newsroom operates a little different. I kind of operate in my own little bubble, silo. Sometimes I'll work with a fellow reporter on a certain project, or we might have, kind of an off-air kind of journalist called a producer who will help us put things together. And obviously we have photographers that help us shoot the video that we bring in charge with. And there's a whole hierarchy of stuff in which this goes through to get checked, right? I have a supervisor that I run, what I'm doing and my stories through. And then those often go to a legal team at our corporate office, for not only fact checking, but standards checking and all of that. And so, there is a lot going into it. But at the local level, I mean, some stories that we do that are truly investigative, not just called investigative. You'll see a lot of local news, unfortunately. I don't want to besmirch the whole industry call things investigative and really are not. They're investigative in name only, but true investigative stories can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months to several years. I've spent years looking into some things over the course of time, and sometimes stuff comes together much quicker. But really, to harken back to something Phil said earlier, an investigation, how much time, it's whatever that story needs. And if it's important enough to do it, if that takes us weeks or it takes us months or it takes us years, we'll work on it to make it happen.
And I would add, from a local perspective, I agree with everything that Dave just said. The one thing I would add is that also just from experience, I do a lot of critical listening, as I mentioned earlier, and sometimes I'll hear politicians say something and I'll think that just does not sound right, and is that true? And doing what your students do is going and checking, is like, is that true? And so the next story that's on my list is something that politicians made a really big point about on the floor of the Tennessee State House, and I was like, that doesn't sound true. And I checked, and sure enough, it is just a flat out lie. And so that's another place that we get some of our ideas.
I don't know if you want me to add to that, but just to kind of give another perspective too. I mean, I definitely have the same experiences. Once you've done a lot of reporting on a certain issue, you have people who come to you. But for example, with the fentanyl story that I presented, and if you want to see it, it's scripsnews.com/fentanyl is the whole series that we've been working on. But that really started with curiosity. I wanted to know, I asked for a list from the medical examiner's office of every kid that had died of a fentanyl overdose. I just was curious, and then I had to fight to get some of that and the names and stuff like that. And then I saw a baby on the list, and I was like, and when I found that out, then I realized, then I inquired about it with the police department, who was like, oh no, that case is closed, and there was never any criminal thing happen. And I said, well, the autopsy, which I had also gotten, said fentanyl. So I had gotten all these records, and that then led the police department to restart their investigation, and they ended up arresting someone. But then that prompted me to be like, I wonder how often this is happening, because I kept seeing one-offs all across. And just on a side note, I'm also working on a story right now with a kid who picked up a pill in a kindergarten classroom program called SAFE. So it can happen everywhere. It's literally, we have cases from almost every single state, and that curiosity built us to gathering all these other cases. And then when we built this spreadsheet, we started documenting things like, was the parent asleep? Did the kid get Narcan? Was there drug paraphernalia left out? There was a variety of things. Did child welfare workers have some sort of red flag ahead of this? And then that led to now what is now, I'm going to have like 5, 6, 7, 8 parts of this series and we've gotten the attention of congressional leaders. So I think it can start with a lot of different ways. And then sometimes, like, as these guys were saying too, like with the other project I brought up was, sometimes there's something wrong that happens. Somebody dies and it's like, wait, as Phil was saying, there's something that's not right about this. And I remember when I was doing that ketamine story at the beginning, and I just kept asking questions. And I even had people were blocking me from information. Health officials were trying. I got an inadvertent email one time that somebody said, this reporter's asking questions and we're going to deny her. Somebody forwarded me this email, but I kept asking questions, and I built sources. And that's one thing. And by building sources, I mean calling a ton of people, dozens, hundreds of people, reading, researching, and eventually 4 years later, my stories have affected laws. So I think there's a lot of different ways that stories can start.
So there's a question in the chat and then also in the Q&A that they're kind of related. And so it's really about, the nature of the work, the people you're investigating, the subject matter. There's going to be backlash and potential recriminations. And Phil, I actually just spoke to one of your colleagues the other day about some of the nastiness that's been directed at you from your work. So can you just describe a little bit of that? And like, how do you handle the backlash, the recriminations, and even like the threats?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in a situation where threats, efforts to intimidate me have sort of become my normal. In particular, and I'll throw this into the chat in a moment, this investigation of the white supremacists in the small town of Franklin, Tennessee. The white supremacists were issuing veiled threats against me. Some of the threats were coming from a person who had actually threatened to kill me 25 years ago. And then there was all sorts of misinformation, disinformation. The white supremacists created an image of me in blackface, and then a Moms for Liberty activist took that image and posted this horrendous story about how I had once been afraid of a car bomb, and so I paid an elderly black janitor $10 a day to go start my car so that if it exploded, he would get killed and not me. And you know there were even allegations that I was getting paid to do these stories. And we're just in a period of time with journalists being portrayed as the enemy of the people, being portrayed as fake news, that it can get ugly out there. But you know, I approach my job, you know, almost like a calling. And my job is to be a truth teller, no matter how difficult it is. And you know, the station is very supportive. Scripps is very supportive. When I need security, you know, Scripps is there for me. And so we learn how to take reasonable precautions. But you know, the object of a lot of these efforts is to push us from the playing field, to push us from the field of battle, if you will. And so if we back down from what we're doing, then they win and democracy loses. And so it's part of the job these days.
Yeah, all this year, my family and I have received a series of threatening phone calls and letters related to some reporting I've done on the Phoenix Police Department and their efforts to work with prosecutors to falsely charge protesters as gang members. It's gotten a lot of people in a lot of trouble. And, you know, the goal for them is to intimidate you. They knew almost immediately when I had moved to a different house. Within a couple days, we got mail sent to me and my neighbors. They've mailed my wife's mother-in-law, who passed recently, her obituary picture to her with a pretty nasty statement. So there are some awful people out there that want to deter you. And I think, you know, what Phil said, you know, you have to think of this somewhat as a calling, because, you know, it's, you know, there's a personal toll that it takes, and we believe it's that important. I didn't actually get into this to be in TV on the news. I started as a print reporter, and it's just kind of the evolution of my career. I ended up on this. And those people that you saw in that story I did about those lawsuits, when they were spreading their scheme across the country, they started setting up business entities using my information, because they were like trying to like project it on me to kind of like, you know, do it. So, you know, unfortunately, it's become very common. It's, you know, hopefully, you know, it doesn't often extend to family. Thankfully, that's a much rarer thing that I've experienced, but I almost every time take on a big project, I've come to expect it personally, especially when you take on people in power or people in their gravity who will, you know, lose some of their power tangentially. And it just, that kind of shows how nasty, you know, some of the people we investigate can be.
So connecting to this, Lori Jane in particular, your story on the use of ketamine, obviously highly critical of law enforcement and, you know, the paramedics and people who are using this, and you're exposing this on a national scale. You know, obviously there's going to be a lot of backlash in general about, you know, going after law enforcement, right? How do you sort of present, like, you know, I guess their perspective, their side, if they don't necessarily want to talk to you, right? We want to try to understand why they're doing this, right? So what's the big challenge there? And you're still muted.
Sorry. Yeah. So it's the paramedics that are using the ketamine, and it's in police situations. And Yeah, I did have a lot of struggle. I mean, I think one thing that you do is when people don't want to talk to you, you just keep you keep asking. You find there's going to be one person out there who eventually does ask. And a lot of our job too requires a lot of patience. I think, on a broader level, not just specifically about this story, but oftentimes we'll be investigating something where there's a lawsuit or there's a questionable thing that has happened and you're reporting on it, but the people who are in question are not going to speak to you. But there are other ways that you can find information to find out what their perspective is. For example, they may have filed an answer publicly in a lawsuit. So they physically would not be speaking to you, but like you can actually go look in court filings and say, okay, but on 2 weeks ago, they did say this in the court filing, and you can quote from that. So that's one way. It doesn't speak exactly to what you were saying about the ketamine thing, but yeah. And when people didn't talk to me, I just kind of pressed on and tried to find other resources. There's literature that's written. There are position papers that are out there. So there's other ways, and I think that I would encourage for anybody that is, teaching people how to figure out what's real and what's not. I mean, it's just to think outside of the box. Okay, cool. I can't get my answer here, but can I get it from that person? Or is there a document that might have existed? And I think it's really important to maybe become aware of what things that you might have access to as a member of the public. What is a public record? There's a lot of things that you can get, and there are a lot of people who are called public information officers who are supposed to, they don't always, but that are there to help at least guide you to what you are allowed to have access to, because this is stuff we own and we have a right to know it. I don't know if that answered your question, but
It does. It's obviously there's a lot of challenges in trying to get these down. This is one of the big things that we're trying to communicate to educators when we do this, and we have the professionals from the various news organizations. We're shining a light on the work that you do, so people can sort of learn more about this and hopefully come to a better understanding of journalism. Okay, so that's going to get us to the end of this session. We have a couple more going on this afternoon. I'm going to share our feedback survey. If people can please give us your feedback, how we're doing. If you'd like to if you want to ask some follow-up questions, you can send them to us here and we will connect you to the various folks. So Lori, Jane, Dave, and Phil, thank you so much for your time and expertise today. This has been a very good session. I think it really opens up a lot of eyes to just how difficult this work is and what steel you all have in your backbones for being able to to keep doing what you do and dealing with the backlash. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the survey link has been dropped in the chat. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Our next session is coming up here in about 10 to 15 minutes. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you in later on this afternoon.